Ladies and gentlemen, hello again and welcome back to Don't Worry About the Government. My name is Chris Novembrino. It's been a minute. How have you been? I am joined here today by Brian Halverson, who is off camera today. Well, we don't need to get into why you're
We
off camera.
could.
I mean, okay, you got MRSA. You got
Yeah, oh my
MRSA, and
God,
I don't want
yes.
to put you. I don't want to put you on camera when you got.
Yeah.
We have a standing policy here on this show, in particular, about skin maladies on the face, and when you
I
have
mean,
one, you don't have to be on camera on this show.
let's just say I kind of wish this happened around the Halloween season. It would have gone well in a variety of scary costumes. I could have just walked around and people like, that's great makeup. But no, it's not anything. I'm doing us all a favor. Uh, you're just gonna.
I hope the next time, the next time we see you, you're gonna come back with like eye patch and like vicious face scar and shit. Yeah,
Oh man.
be gnarly. That'll also like pave the way for when you become like a villain in like an action movie or something like that.
Well, I am thanking my lucky stars for two things. Number one, that this did not happen under the extreme middle of COVID season. I'm concerned how much I would have delayed going to the hospital and then how quickly I could have been seen. Maybe this could have been done virtually, but I'm predicting there were certain points of the COVID season I would have been in a bad way. But also the fact that I have a spouse who is even checking up on me. I am, I think I would say if I was still a single person, I would be very bad at at caring for myself in this way. Just noticing that something was escalating and putting it off. This could have been very bad if I did not have a very good spouse checking up on me.
Yes, it sounds like yes, you do have a very good and loving and caring spouse on your hands. And also, when you told me, I immediately went into all of my safety measures for MRSA and staff because I live in paralyzing fear of it because I got it back when we were in college. I got a really bad case of it when I was supposed to be taking Spanish in college. Like I was doing the accelerated Spanish, and about 2 weeks in, so we had completed semester one of the 4 semesters of Spanish. 2 weeks in, I've been going out and bike riding all summer. Got staph. Thought I had been bitten by a mosquito, and all of a sudden, like there were sites colonized all over my leg, and
Hmm.
dude, it was really bad. It started working its way up my leg. It was a precarious and scary June and early July, and then I was like pumped up on. I remember one of them was called sulfameth. That made me feel real bad. And then like all the standard antibiotics, ointment. I've had a couple of recurrences of MRSA since then. So now I order Hibiclens, and I use Hibiclens as my standard soap, or and like I make a blend of Hibiclens and like like Old Spice or whatever. Doesn't smell um amazing. Doesn't smell horrible, but it's not like like an aroma you'd want. But I'm more like, dude, I just never want to ever get staph. And
Right.
so when you told me that, I was like, oh god, that's horrible. Staph. As scared as I am about COVID, staph is just like this constant, like lingering background fear for me. So I definitely feel you, dude. I'm wishing you speedy recovery, of course.
Well, thanks. And also in the day of antibiotics, I can just imagine like when my daughter is my age, what is Mercer gonna look like? Uh just as antibiotics are continually leaned on, just more and more and more, and MRSA becomes just more aggressive. It's just the way it is. Uh my goodness.
Yeah, no. It
This is a problem that's going to get worse for people just continuously.
no, it's staff is no joke. Proper
All right.
hygiene, people. Proper hygiene.
Good grief.
All right, so today's show is a one-topic show. There's actually a lot going on domestically that I, when time permits, am going to circle back around on. Whether we are talking about the Supreme Court or we're talking about what has gone on here in Texas, obviously the new extremely anti-trans law, or executive order getting passed by Greg Abbott, which happened to drop at the same time as another major story that affects Greg Abbott, where he was doing some inside dealing to the power companies here, with ERCOT, the energy coalition of Texas. I don't know what ERCOT stands for. I wish I knew that off the top of my head. But basically, there's a lot of stuff going on in Texas. Texas Republicans are really bad, y'all. I've been telling you this, and that very much remains true. Supreme Court nomination is real interesting right now. Joe Manchin is up to his Joe Manchin-y antics at this point, looking like he is pushing for the Clyburn and Lindsey Graham preferred nominee instead of the more progressive nominee. And that may just be a prelude to scuttling whatever Joe Biden wants to do, period. But those are some of the many domestic stories that we are not going to be able to get to today, because the one topic that I think we need to meaningfully explore on this show, and I just want to like leave the mental bandwidth for, is Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Now, on the last episode, I somewhat foolishly thought that the odds of Russia actually invading Ukraine were about 30 to 40%. I had it under a coin flip, close to a coin flip, but like not at a coin flip. Like, I thought Russia was building up all these troops on the border. I did sort of continually inton, well, like they're not doing it for nothing. Like clearly there's something going on here, like leaving your options open. In the same way that, like, if the United States had been building up troops along the Canadian border, the Canadians should have been a little bit worried about that. I think the Ukrainians were right to be worried about that, and that's been
well with Putin. You can see an immediate economic incentive just to put troops at the border. The price of oil goes up. So if you want to, if you could just say, does Putin have a short game in just putting troops on the border and it not going anywhere else? Yes, he does. So it does make sense to consider that as just his complete end game. Like, the goal was to put troops on the border. The oil goes up. I pull the troops back. Oil stays up.
Yeah, no, if he had done that, like, basically if he had saber rattled, you look at the Russian stock market, the saber rattling was actually really good. It was leading to a major rally in the Russian stock market, which only has now fallen off a cliff now that Russia has actually invaded Ukraine. The short-term play could have been there, and I think it's definitely worth ruminating what Vladimir Putin wants. Why not start there? I think so often the American discourse has gone in very weird directions of, are we going to send troops and should they reinstate a draft? And, like, before we even consider any of those things, let us consider what it is that Vladimir Putin wants here. And on the last show, to give the hat tip to William West, I think the right answer here is that Putin never accepted the defeat of Russia as the Soviet Union in the late 90s. He is an ex-KGB guy. And when you listen to his meandering, you appreciated this reference, the cybernetic ghost of Christmas past, like, speech that he was giving to Macron, where he was going, thousands of years ago into the future, Russia was once structurally attacked, and went on for like hours and hours and hours. I think the whole cybernetic ghost of Christmas past Putin thing, it was indicative. One, that I enjoyed Aqua Teen Hunger Force a lot in college.
Yeah, Chris, I think this is worthy of a drop. In case there are some folks in the audience who are not as big of a fan of Aqua Teen Hunger Force as we are.
I'll put it in. There's going to be limited post-production here, but, like, yes, you have never seen the Cybernetic Ghost of Christmas Past episode, go and see it. It's a good one. And, like, no, Putin basically in the prelude to this was talking to world leaders and giving these extended thousands of years ago into the future sort of speeches to every world leader who would listen about why, Crimea, Georgia, and now Ukraine and these breakaway regions, why historically these are all part of Russia. And I think William was basically on the right track here with that. So, for example, if I'm Moldova right now, which is right next to Ukraine, I'm extremely worried
Okay,
that
so
Vladimir Putin's going to continue on with this crusade.
so now that we consider his end game is totally different than just an economic one, this is moving the lines.
This is, I
My
think, a
first
legacy checklist
right.
thing.
My
Yeah. This
first
is a
idea
legacy thing for
is
him.
his goal throughout this is to posture as irrational for wanting the lines moved to this pre-Soviet era geography. And then when you come back and say, okay, I'm accepting the geography of the current terms, but by the way, these certain territories are still, once again, they're a part of Russia now. They're independent states. Then he comes off as slightly rational. So he doesn't really have an end game at changing the geography. He just knows that if he initially plays this, it's the over. Aren't you happy I didn't go that far? It's one of those. I feel there's something there.
I think that if he had left it at the Donbass region, that maybe that boat floats a little bit more. But
Okay.
as we are taping this, he attacked Kiev.
Yeah.
So aren't you happy I left it at blah? Sort of doesn't work anymore either. And like, let's be clear here. Like, Putin's absolutely the malign actor. It's a whole cause for doing all of this is super tenuous. Let's get into that. He said he's invading Ukraine to do a denazification and demilitarize or demobilize the military. The president, of course, of Ukraine is a Jewish comedian, and the whole pretense that Putin even has the right to demobilize the military is really predicated on this notion that Russia ultimately actually has the right to oversee affairs in Ukraine in a way that no other country does because historical reasons.
Yeah. I'm wondering if that is the lens that he considers overtaking surrounding territories, what other territories is he not considering overtaking? That if he were honestly using this lens, you could say, but what about A, B, C, and D? I mean, how many?
I think it's a real question. Where's the line? Is he going to go for Poland? I brought up Moldova. I think Moldova is like legitimately in play here. Like, allow me to get the Ukraine map up real quickly for those.
If you're talking about countries in this area with actual alt-right connections, let's take it at face value that he has actually found some alt-right movement in the Ukraine that he is trying to squash. Okay, so
again, why would he have any right to do that?
Right. But then what other countries have just as big of an alt-right movement as Ukraine does?
Russia.
Right. There's Russia. There's Russia. Of course. Let's not gaze that. Let's not turn the mirror that directly.
Is that staring into the cat's asshole?
But I've got to think that all of these countries could be wrongly associated in that way, and you should be able to make them objectively fear. Like, look. If you have anywhere near this little fringe element, Putin's going to say this about you next. And
dude, the pretenses for this war are even flimsier than like the United States invasion of Iraq, right? Like, at least like the United States invasion of Iraq, the claim was, bombastic and false claim, by the way, that the Iraqis had weapons of mass destruction. Putin's not even claiming that in his justification for invading Ukraine. He's saying that like the Nazi problem's so out of hand in Ukraine, the Ukrainians can't even muster the ability to ask for help on solving this Nazi problem, and it's up to them. Like a good neighbor, Russia is there.
I'd like to think that the lesson we're going to figure out through all this is how in the hell did the free world find itself in such a precarious situation to allow Russia to make this play to begin with? Like, how did it become
It's
a
our
50?
hemming and hawing on NATO, right? One of the biggest problems, and we'll talk about Trump, but like I almost need to put him in a box because he's like such a bad leader and actor on this that like you have to almost have a different discussion. Like you have like Obama and Bush, and I guess Biden as an extension of that because he was like basically kind of helping Obama out and as vice president, especially on the foreign policy stuff. But like Bush and Obama were really gung ho on this idea of breaking bread and making nicey nice with Vladimir Putin. Like remember McCain in criticizing Bush was like, Bush said that he looked into Vladimir Putin's eyes and saw a friend, and McCain was like, I looked into Vladimir Putin's eyes and saw KGB.
Mhm.
Obama was making light of the Cold War stuff. Like Mitt Romney was on stage saying, I think like our biggest geostrategic threat right now is Russia. A statement that doesn't quite hold up to
All right.
scrutiny fully, but like Obama was like, get out of the Cold War, buddy. And then like within months of Obama saying that, I guess it'd be 24 months specifically, the Russians are invading Crimea, which is the middle step here between the Georgia invasion and then the Crimean invasion and now this. So like Obama's mindset on this aged really poorly too. I don't think the international community ever took the Russian problem seriously. And so there was never any sense of urgency, particularly on the United States part, whether it's Bush or Obama, to get Ukraine into NATO. And in a lot of cases, they took Russia's bizarre argument that Ukraine entering NATO is somehow aggression against Russia, and ipso facto, Russia actually has the right to keep Ukraine out of NATO. Um, they took that argument way too much at face value just to be able to say they were making nicey nice with Putin.
Mm.
And then obviously, if we want to talk about Donald Trump, like this is a guy who literally, as we know from the Mueller report, if the plan had been able to go off, would have had a ribbon cutting with Vladimir Putin for Trump Tower Moscow as the signature foreign policy moment in the 2016 campaign if that moment had been allowed to come to fruition. How is Donald Trump as president of the United States ever going to meaningfully push back on Vladimir Putin if he's got a Trump Tower Moscow?
All right, so I'm going to try and throw something at relevant at you here that just is a conversation I haven't heard yet. I'm trying to put the timeline of the Trans-Pacific Partnership in with this, and is there anything related to this that because of
No, TPP is more of a China thing.
Right, but I'm trying to think of, because something dissolved, it allowed the power to. There's just not enough here for me to understand why there wasn't enough pushback. And I just don't have it squared up enough.
The global community's been really scared of Putin. And I think a better way of looking at this is, so you're really trying to ask, how do we get here?
Right.
And I'd argue, how do we get here? Let's look back at like we'll go back to the Georgia invasion in 2008. We are all Georgians now. That started. And since then, Putin has been doing little dinks and dabs and like kind of, you had the nibble at Crimea. You had the interference of the 2016 campaign. You had Putin get involved in Brexit earlier in 2016 and motivate that. You had Putin poisoning the Skripals. You had the MH. Oh, I get the numbers always mixed up. I want to say it's MH370, but it's the Ukrainian airline, or the airline shot over Ukraine by the Russians. You have a number of these international incidences. I mean, using chemical weapons on British soil with poisoning the Skripals is pretty substantial. Navalny getting poisoned, like the people falling out of the windows all the time. There have been a number of bad actor incidences that have been happening over the last 10 years. And what has the global response been to Putin? Nothing. Nothing. They didn't even get the sanctions meaningfully up. Only now are they meaningfully talking about sanctioning Russian oligarchs. So it has been 10 years of Putin moving the chains forward on how much he can step into your lane. I can use chemical weapons on British soil. Cool. I'm going to help out Marine Le Pen in the French election now. This will be the third election I've meddled in. Oh, you guys have a problem with that? Didn't think so. Oh, we're going to have our people hack into the U.S. power companies and that sort of thing. Any response on that? No? Cool. Oh, you guys found out about all of the FSB, Fancy Bear and Cozy Bear stuff? What are you going to do about it? Nothing? Okay, cool. We'll be doing that again. And so like, I kind of like, how did we get here? Like, how do we get to the Putin just going, you know what? Fuck it. Let's just go for Kiev. If you're sitting in that Russian meeting room, what's the argument to the contrary? Like, why the fuck not? Like, what are they going to do? Do we really? I'd call the West bluff.
Yeah, I think in the element of our times that gives him the courage to do this is we're in a post Jamal Khashoggi, the journalist who was murdered in Saudi Arabia.
Yep, Khashoggi's actually Khashoggi. No, you're totally right. Khashoggi's another really important inflection point in this,
because he knows then that if you're in a certain position to just make the media disappear, and that's a precedence as far as
and make reprisal disappear.
Yeah,
I mean the Khashoggi thing. They did that to an ally. The Saudis did that to an ally, and the U.S. bitched out.
Yeah,
and even when the Democrats got back into office, they still bitched out on doing anything about the beheading.
I think that was a signal, like, okay, now that that's how we know this play is going to go down, we can now treat the media and steamroll them with a power that they have to respect. Like this can get bloody, and we know we can get away with this.
I mean, and you look at Europe in disarray. I think they actually think to this point, Putin was really smart in biding his time here, especially with the way he was sort of meddling in different elections in Europe, because European relations suck right now. Don't forget about the Nord Stream 2 pipeline that the Germans bid on. Another key strategic mistake. So you had like the Germans, the French, and the Brits all very much at loggerheads right now, different priorities, different levels of competency. When you're talking about Boris Johnson, and also different levels of coziness with the Russians. That's the sort of subtle genius here of Putin. So how did he get here? He sort of moved the pieces around the board for about 12 to 14 years. And the most important part was, during all of this, the dominant argument, the one that always won the day, is 'tis better to do nothing than something. At the end of all of this, at long last, how do you arrive at a moment where a country's invading a sovereign nation and trying to take their capital? It's a pile of 'tis better to do nothing than somethings.
Well, and when you are an authoritarian who can prosecute a 15-year timeline, and you can do it as your adversary has to do things every 4 years, and those things can be marketed against themselves. The
genius of playing the Republican Party against the Democrat on Russia too,
yes.
Right? I mean, savvy.
Well, so before I get away from this, one of the moments that I think I witnessed, as far as some genius on Putin's level, unfortunate, I witnessed some counter propaganda of Putin getting all of these Russian border towns to evacuate out of the fear of the Ukrainian invasion. And so it's this Russian soldier looking at this grandma in the face, and this grandma processing, oh, this is why I have to leave my town that I haven't left in 700 years, because I'm 700 years old.
You
Because
know,
this
this
like
picture doesn't even really do
like
justice to the disparity of scale between Ukraine and Russia.
right. And so this lady is looking at this soldier and processing, like you can tell it on her face. She's like, I cannot oppose this, and I have to look at him and somewhat take him seriously. But you could tell that there was a part of her face that was revealing, I know this is bullshit. Like I know, and I have to do this. But oh my gosh, I like, oh man, I'm gonna do my best to find that, but just knowing that that is how much a part of the nation that he is up for grabs as far as how he markets this.
So, to continue on the how did we get here thing and the political crosswinds thing, I was thinking about that a little bit more. So, obviously, you have the massive reorientation of the Republican Party to become pro Russia that coincides with Donald Trump's presidential campaign. I don't have the citations and figures up here right at the moment, but I know I have pulled them up within the last 2 months. Like that is numerically true. I will prepare those and put those into the show notes. I want to be clear that I'm trying to stand on terra firma on that one for sure. So you have that. At the same time, if we go over to the UK, a place that I'm obviously a little less conversant on, it's not my home country, but you have a general weakness of the Labour Party. Corbyn, for whatever good you want to say about him, he sucks on foreign policy. And like this whole build up to the Ukraine invasion, he was absolutely both sides and equivocating. And it leaves this real credibility vacuum on the left when it comes to speaking on foreign policy on this. On the left, specifically with regards to labor, not like all left. But like Corbyn is doing a disservice to left politics in the 21st century. And that leaves a vacuum to be filled by, of all people, Boris fucking Johnson, who has massive ties to Russian government. And actually, like the whole Leave campaign of which he was a part had a lot of serious help from Russia, particularly for Nigel Farage's party.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. So, and then we move over to France. France, right now, you have Macron. Macron is unbelievably unpopular. And there's no, at least as best I can tell, clear sort of like good alternative vision for how France should go. It's just Macron sucks and we don't know what else to do. This is a Friedman-like unpopular center trying to hold off the wolves on the left and the right flank right now. And then you go over to Germany, and Germany has complicated relations. Merkel was always a little bit intimidated by Vladimir Putin. Going back to, I don't know if you remember the dog incident. Do you remember the dog incident?
No.
Okay, so kind of give you like a little more anecdotal evidence of just the type of guy Putin is. So Putin is set to meet with Merkel. I forget the year. But it becomes known to Putin that Merkel is terrified of dogs, that she was attacked by a dog as a child. So in advance of this meeting, Putin gets a dog and has a dog there with Merkel. You can find the picture online of Putin with the dog and Merkel, and you can see how uncomfortable Angela Merkel is. He's just been pushing this whole fucking time. And I think...
sounds like something LBJ would do.
Yeah, it is an LBJ type move. Yeah, no, like I mean, it's a strong move. It's a dick move.
Yeah,
it's a dick move, but it's a strong move. And the thing is, okay, people keep going, oh, it's a dick move. I don't want to be a dick. Okay, I get it, but the world has jerks in it. And you have to figure out a way to deal with society and the world's jerks. And if you don't figure out a way to deal with society and the world's jerks, then the world's jerks tend to run Roughshod. Roughshod's the word. There we go. Ramrod, roughshod. There are many words. I know some of them. They run roughshod, ramshod, across the world. And I think we are now at a crossroads where we have to consider what response is to this action. And I guess on one hand, frankly, let's just say for conversation's sake that Russia had just woken up and decided to invade Ukraine. I'd still probably say you need to push it back. You need to push them back. Like Russia needs to be pushed back to their borders. But we're talking about this is the third attempt at territorial annexation by the Russians in 20 years. I think that it's high time the West has a conference with NATO, that horrible, evil organization, and the United Nations, which does not work very well, and figure out how they're militarily pushing Russia back into their own borders. Because either we have a post-World War II order or we don't. This is the thing I've really been struggling with, and then I'll let you hop in here. Right now, we're in this weird moment, dude, where you have a country that is invading and annexing territory on a regular basis, and has been doing so for the last decade. And you got another country that is overseeing a massive ethnic cleansing. And those two countries are talking with one another. And yeah, they got historical friction and all that stuff too, but they're chatting with one another. And if you sum up what those two countries are doing right now, the annexing territory and the ethnic cleansing to ensure a Han people for all of one dominant, correct Chinese race. You sum those together and you start to go, have we lost all of the gains that we got after World War II? Did we really backslide this quickly in less than 75 years?
Yeah, and how do we not give those two players the motivation to behave otherwise?
And do we still care about that? And if we don't care about, I guess I sort of go what is a leftism that doesn't care about territorial sovereignty and doesn't care about ethnic cleansings? Why were we opposed to the Iraq War then? What was what's the real art? It just seemed like a bad idea. Right. It obviously has to go back to you don't have the right to invade another country. It has to start there. There needs to be moral clarity rather than just it doesn't seem pragmatic. No, it's worse than just not practical. It's evil.
I'm thinking there's a sports parable that's coming to mind here, but I don't want to diminish the talk of the sports.
All right, where are you taking me on this one?
We're gonna take a knee.
Am I taking a knee?
No. What did you say?
I said, where are you taking me on this one? Where are we going?
All right,
I fail to see how going Kaepernick in this situation is going to help me.
No. This is a recent topic with the Dallas Cowboys. There was a person in the hierarchy of the administration named I believe it's Rich Dalrymple, and this guy recently came out as just being a total creep. He was taking pictures of the cheerleaders and he was a total creep. But then this guy, his position within the team was the fixer. Okay, when any player had a problem that needed to be shut up in the media, this guy would take care of it. Now the problem is, as far as this fixer having kind of predilections that are unprofessional, the problem is that you can now presuppose that the only reason the ownership didn't get rid of the fixer is because the fixer was fixing things on behalf of the ownership. Okay, so I guess what I'm saying is when you have
this kind of gets back to the DNC RNC hacks of 2016.
Yes.
Yeah, Putin's got a lot, much like your Dalrymple here, Putin has a lot of dirt on world leaders.
Right. And so,
So
yes.
there are a lot of powerful people who like staying powerful more than they like doing the right thing.
Right. And so we have a situation where Putin has found himself to be the fixer in some cases. And that's been okay in the past. But now the fixer has the predilection of, claiming parts of the Ukraine. And the reason why you can't oppose this is because, well, he knows things, or he like there's interplay. There's interplay that we don't know about. And I suppose that's why I wanted to bring that up is this is a cleaner conversation when the good guys in the scenario have cleaner exchanges with this figure. And we can just presuppose that there have been unclean exchanges. there's something that is in one direction or another, in many directions, are keeping people from otherwise playing a stronger hand.
Yeah, absolutely. One second here. Yeah, I think there are a number of different moving pieces, and I think that maybe gets us to the next part of the conversation of what then should be done about what Russia is doing right now. And there is the weird, faulty argument that we need to mobilize troops out to Ukraine right now. And I think when we say mobilize troops, the reason I say it's a faulty premise argument is we may indeed need to mobilize troops, but like, who are we talking about? We're talking about mobilizing the Air Force. We're not talking about doing a logistical push to put tanks out there. What you would need to do essentially is make it so that the Russian tanks can't operate. The Russians have chosen to put a bunch of tanks into Ukrainian soil. You now have a couple of different options on that. You can hit them with drones. You can hit them with planes with missiles. There are any number of different moves, but I think Russia has to meaningfully be pushed back. I don't necessarily know that we need to recruit anyone new into the army. I think you essentially at this point have to call Putin's bluff. How much is Putin willing to raise the temperature on this? Yeah, like, okay, he's invaded Ukraine, but is he really willing to risk a full-scale war? Does he actually have the at-home support of his people to justify an invasion of Ukraine when he clearly comes off as the bad guys? I have serious doubts that Putin can actually maintain national resolve for a real war against the West, based on the premise of, well, no, we actually have the right to invade Ukraine and we should be doing it. Come on, people, join in.
I think that answer will be better understood once the initial answer from the fuel markets, once it's better understood how a barrel of oil is affected by all this, and how effective the plan Bs go in the sense of not dealing with Russia. We believe we know how
Well,
effective
the wheat thing is actually probably going to be the bigger factor here.
The what?
Wheat.
Oh, wheat. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, wheat's going to probably be the bigger issue. Wheat prices already going up. Russia and Ukraine, I think, combined for 25% of global production of wheat. So this war is going to be unbelievably disruptive to that part of the global economic process. That I think is going to be an interesting question too. And I think you bring up another interesting topic, which is the West needs to take stock of who's on Team the West and who's kind of like playing both sides. Because there are countries like India, like Israel, who now just finally stopped hedging on the notion that invading a territory is an improper. Israel equivocating on the invasion of Ukraine, considering what Israel has been doing to Palestine for the last however many years, is and how Israel would ever feel if their territorial sovereignty was, if it was impacted in any way or encroached upon in any way by any of their neighbors.
Yeah.
It really beggars belief that they spent most of the week here sort of saying, well, both sides need to, own up to this and blah, blah, blah.
Well,
India
I
is also kind of equivocated on this. And I think like there needs to be a real stock of like, who are the problem actors here?
so I don't know if this was a Jen Psaki response, but someone asked,
A sake bomb?
oh no, someone asked, what is the timetable on this? And the immediate response, which you can tell was the Biden administration official response, is this timetable is still predicated on Putin. And I somewhat have to push back on that response because there are two variables here. There's the midterms occur when they occur, and then there's the price of gas. And if you tell me up front that those two variables do not play into all of this, and you're telling me that the price of gas can be anything in October, I disagree.
I just don't think it. I mean, what you're bringing up here, if they're thinking like this, go back to your earlier point about the advantage that Putin, the authoritarian, has had over the West for the last 15, 20 years here, something that she has. Not having to deal with this stupid juggling of political concerns.
Yeah.
And if the White House is really paralyzed by that, I'm with you. The price of gas is not good, obviously, for the Democrats' reelection prospects, but like, let's go ahead and just assume that the midterms are not going to be good for the Democrats at this point. They
Yeah,
mishandled, but like that, and that was baked in the cake way before this Ukraine thing. That they mishandled getting all of their legislative agenda passed. The bipartisan infrastructure bill's not actually really popular, no matter how much Democratic partisans try to yell at you that you actually like it. All of the good stuff that was supposed to be in that bill, that would be stuff that you could run on, isn't actually in the bill because Joe Manchin killed it. The response on COVID-19 has been, for the Democratic Party, way worse than I could have imagined, making me legitimately question how much worse Trump could have made it. And the answer is probably substantially worse, but like actually having to make me ask that question, not a good sign on their performance. I just think I mean, in this Supreme Court nomination, which is far from a guarantee at this point, all these things sum together to make you kind of go like, I don't know, man. I don't know that the Democrats actually had much of a chance of getting reelected anyway. So like at this point, the best thing that Joe Biden could do is kick Rush's ass and be like, I kicked Rush's ass. Vote Biden.
There you go.
No, this is America.
No.
And I know like that's not going to be, music to the ears of lefties or whatever, but like, I kicked Rush's ass is going to be music to the ears of a lot of Democrats and even some Republicans who are pretty squeamish about the way Tucker Carlson is literally making content that is so favorable to the Russians that the Russians clip it and use it as state propaganda.
Yeah, and if you're a leftist who is feeling awkward about this, maybe you caught the press conference where Jen Psaki, like her or not, fielded the question. And Chris, I would love to hear your response to this. We were told at the beginning of the Biden administration that the number one threat to our country is climate change. Do you still agree with that? Is climate change still the number one threat to our country? Now,
what did she say?
She had a very meandering answer that basically said, I don't have a new answer to that question. other than what we said. And it was,
yeah, she should have just answered. I don't have a new answer. Because, like, the real answer, if we want to expound, this is
but
not what her job would be. And, like, don't get me
right.
wrong. Little Miss West Wing is not, like, my favorite human being in the world or anything. But,
No,
like,
not mine either.
the answer here is, okay, Ukraine's a problem, but, like, Ukraine's not actually a real threat to the United States unless Vladimir Putin chooses to go nuclear on this. And if
No, but I
yeah,
guess what I'm saying is this is day one of Fox counter messaging. If you don't think it's going further in that direction, just to pull the left apart from the
but
center.
that I think is going to fracture Fox too, right? Like this whole.
I don't know what it's going to do.
No,
to Fox.
because, like,
really
Tucker
care.
Carlson's not going to toe the line on that. Like Tucker's made it very clear that, like, the real ghouls in your life are these stupid liberals who are trying to get you fired from your job for saying sexist things to your coworkers. Yeah, Tucker Carlson is not going to get on board with the idea that Russia's a bigger threat than climate change, because he doesn't think Russia's a threat at all.
But
if
I
anything,
also think
Tucker Carlson would be like, we need to be worried about pollution. You know what I mean? Like, he wouldn't say climate change, but he would literally say we need to focus on things at home. That's like the classic anti-war, in air quotes, stupid, dumb anti-war thing. Is like, let's just stay at home sort of thing.
So the two things I noticed, and I again, I appreciate you once again commanding me to keep consuming all this right-wing media for the sake of the show. The other
fucked up of me, honestly, but, like, yeah, no, keep doing it, please.
The other thing I noticed was on the Newsmax feed, they were already dunking on how much less traction now the Supreme Court nomination is going to receive. Like, however it goes, now that this whole Ukraine thing's going on, he's not going to have any sort of media brownie points due to this whole process.
I wish Joe Biden knew how to walk and chew gum. I wish I believed that Joe Biden was ruthlessly competent enough that he could get Kentucky Jackson Brown onto the Supreme Court quietly with, like, no, because if he did that, I'd be like, fuck yeah, Joe Biden. All right, fuck yeah, whatever. Yeah, like, let's do it. Let's go.
I guess you're saying they have too much of a point.
Yeah,
but it's them celebrating.
A refrain I often say is, "Be the Democrats the Republicans say you are."
Yeah.
Just if they're gonna say this about you guys, anyways, just be it. It's clearly the thing they're the most afraid of. They're the most afraid you'd act like that. That's why they're trying to preempt it. What they want is for you to be like, oh, you don't want us to do that? Well, then instead, we're gonna be weak and middling. How do you like that? Gotcha. Like, owned you, buddy. Okay. So, all right. What other topics do we need? Okay, you know what we need to talk about? I do think this is actually probably a meaningful place to end it. I brought up the shit list and how Tucker's got to be on it, but man, there are a bunch of people on our side of the aisle who have been so wrong on this Ukraine thing that I think the argument for, like, unfollowing them. I mean, I'm not a canceler. Like, I don't care. I'm not saying I'm not going to be like, cancel Hassan. That's stupid. Who cares? That requires energy. Unfollow him. Do not give Hassan Piker any more of your energy. Why that guy? I mean, dude, all the way leading up to the very moment of the Russian invasion, Piker was like, this isn't going to happen. He was blaming the U.S. and doing this both sidesy crap. That, like, you got to remember, the U.S. has been antagonizing Russia for years. Okay, the U.S. has been antagonizing Russia for years, and that justifies Russia invading Ukraine, because what? And then even after Russia invaded Ukraine, Piker's on his feed, his very well watched, like, over 40,000 live viewers. And I mean, he's like way bigger than Vosh or any of the other bread tumors. He's on there and saying things like, oh, Russia's going to minimize casualties and that sort of thing, doing this unbelievable apologia and equivocation for Russian imperialism and Russian invasion that you could never imagine him doing for the United States. And frankly, if any leftist ever did for the United States, you'd be like, what the hell is going on here? Unfortunately, Piker's not alone on this, but I don't know if you've caught any of Piker's content.
No, thanks.
Yeah.
No, thanks.
Yeah, no, I'm just
Yeah.
I can't do it, man. Other people, Jacobin, even after the invasion, I gotta read the Jacobin stuff because like the Jacobin one's like sort of stunning to me, just because even after they were like, yes, indeed, Mr. Putin does indeed share some blame for what he's doing, but let us also make sure that we leave a little bit of extra space for the West here and their antagony and stuff. It's like, dude, like we have to stop.
Well,
Yeah,
yeah, I, I did hear a lot of let's let's uh let's stir around what could be happening in the Ukraine while we don't think about what we definitely know is happening in Russia. It, there was just, you could tell conversationally when those sorts of conversations are comfortable, it it doesn't give nearly the speculation on both sides that they claim to give.
yeah. Well,
And
look, there's sort of a negative American exceptionalism that exists. The negative American exceptionalism being that like the United States has this unique monopoly on war crimes, imperialism, capitalism, even, and like corruption between business and the state. And frankly, as you get better versed in the way that countries like China, Russia, and those are the big ones, but even these smaller ones that are kleptocracies, many of which are post Soviet states, you start to realize that one, capitalism runs amok in all of these places that we might assume are like lefty and pure because they had a communist period. And also, that like the United States is maybe a little more, well, not not ideal, middle of the road. A lot of room for improvement. Especially like looking at Trump's like most recent getting off the hook here in Manhattan. Dude, there's a lot of stuff I could talk about domestically here, but these other countries that you might hold up as a vanguard, whether it's Cuba or Venezuela, I guess, or Russia or China or whatever, like they're not so great either. Many of them are and all these countries are capable of just as many evil acts as the United States, and mostly it's a question of opportunity. Um, and I'd go
the
even further here in my presentation earlier in the show and say that in the case of Russia, especially under Vladimir Putin, Putin has shown that he is interested in doing more evil than any United States leader, including Donald Trump, the one we all hate.
this is the crowd, to sum up why I can't really engage with them. If Medicare for All was passed tomorrow and you wanted to high five them as an incremental high five against capitalism, they would roll their fucking eyes at you, because that's what it really is. If Medicare for All passed tomorrow, that is an anti-capitalist victory. It's just not supplanting capitalism with communism. And when you are someone who can't even have a conversation about how things could get better with A, B, and C, but the fact that your only end game happens with tanks, I don't really have anything to talk about with you.
So like
But
the phenomenon of like Jacobin and Hassan, the disastrous Majority Report episodes on Monday and Tuesday, to be clear. Majority Report, great show, still recommend it, love it. Emma and Matt Binder on Monday and Tuesday really could have used Sam Cedar there, and I think Sam Cedar would have pulled them back into Realityville. And instead they put out some real embarrassing content. I mean, I think a lot of what happens there is like I mean, look, as a progressive, there's a lot of things to criticize about the United States, and I think it's sometimes so easy to do the enemy of my enemy is my friend thing politically, or sort of the negative partisanship thing. Where, actually, to do a different example, the Canadian truckers scenario. I think it's possible to get too on board with Trudeau's response. And again, My take on the Canadian truckers, this is very tongue-in-cheek, but like I'd detain all of them and be like vaccinate or sterilization at this point. But no, more seriously, uh it's definitely possible to look at Trudeau, like say freezing all their bank accounts and be way too eager to support Trudeau doing that, um while still like opposing them. I just think negative partisanship really blinds people. This worked with the Republicans. They were so thrilled to see Hillary Clinton get owned that they didn't care that it was being done by like the historical enemy of the Republican Party all through the 20th century, which was like the Russians. Like it didn't matter that it was Vladimir Putin, a guy that they had been well conditioned to be against. I think their flip, as much as Trump's charm offensive had something to do with it, I think it had as much to do with the idea that, well, if Putin's attacking Hillary Clinton, maybe Putin's an okay guy. I think that thrall of negative partisanship is really, really strong, and I think that's a lot of what's happening with the left right now. I think you get critical. Are there? I'll go one step further. Are there maybe, probably more than likely, a number of these actors that we see online that are fairly big left accounts that are loosely on the payroll of Russia, as in they're getting money indirectly? Yeah, I actually do think that. And I think that if we see the United States crack down on RT and people on the RT payroll, it'll be real interesting to see which accounts really whinge about that online. Because it might make you think they're financially tied into something or other. So I think that's not what I think is happening with Majority Report. I think Majority Report, Emma Vigeland, good person, like her. I think she just basically has been so taken by negative American exceptionalism that, in this case, failed to see what's going on here. Cenk Uygur's bizarre ass. I mean, did you see Cenk Uygur's comments? This dropped right before we got on the show here. But I gotta mention, he basically said the reason the Republicans like Putin is because he's white, which is asinine. I mean, does it help? Sure. That's not what's going on here. It really isn't. I get like sort of the negativistic construction that like, would the Republicans like him as much if he was an African strongman? No, but like Africa doesn't have nukes either, so it's like, you know.
I think I was talking about this in the chat earlier. Another thing I saw, I definitely heard on Newsmax that I haven't heard them doing too much before, is calling it Putin's military, and I do think they are super jealous of not being able to say Trump's military, because you can't say Biden's military because that's a pro thing. Like, you don't want to give Biden that credit as being Newsmax. You don't want to give him that power. You're just going to call it the U.S. military. But they like the authoritarian capability, like the rhetorical communication of calling it an individual. They love saying Putin's military. And I, you know me, I believe in things like that and connecting. That's the whole reason I
it's all about certain key phrases, right? If you see the word draft, that's sort of like a way of hooking you into one discussion to avoid the other stuff that we opened up the show with. Like, what is Putin's endgame here? Why is he doing this? How did we get here? Now all of a sudden we're just talking about, well, I don't want to go and fight a war, and like that, but like, you're not. You're like, you're listening to this podcast right now. I'm taping this podcast right now. Later, I'm going to go and teach some guitar lessons. You're going to go and do what you're going to go and do. None of us are going to go and fight this war. It's not going to be like that. But we can still all care about it because it actually matters when we think about what we want our foreign policy to be. And what we also think is morally right and morally wrong. To go back to the bad actors thing here, let me pop up some of these like ridiculous quotes. You got the Jacobin one. Vladimir Putin is ultimately responsible for whatever horror he unleashes, but save some outrage for Western governments who chose to make war inevitable by refusing to compromise. That is bending it as much back to the West doorstop as possible. That's like, Okay, well, if we can't do it 50-50, is it okay if we do it 55-45?
Yeah, what is the play that the
It wasn't
West was supposed to
inevitable.
make?
It was not inevitable. Russia
Ugh.
could have just not sent the fucking tanks. Russia could have just not funded the separatist movements. Russia could have not funded the militias. This is not inevitable. And like I no, I mean this sort of leftism needs to get pushed back against hard because this foreign policy is disastrous. It's killing the movement. Um, you don't. We do not want to be flanked by the dopey center on this shit. We spent so much time arguing about how this dopey center is not up to the tasks and the challenges of the day, as evidenced by 1-6, only to have all this fucking stupid backsliding because we gotta say both sides are responsible when Russia rolls tanks into Ukraine because it's got to be relativism every minute of every day. It can't ever be anything with moral clarity. Like, there can't be the guy who's swinging the fist can't be the bad guy. There has to be a reason, a deep reason why the angry man's swinging his fist. Maybe there is, maybe there isn't, but like, let's start with the disposition that the fist swinger is the bad person here. The force user is the bad person. Um,
So
uh,
speaking of that, what are we going to hear at a upcoming CPAC conference that's going to pull the left in that Tulsi Gabbard's going to say?
Oh, Tulsi Gabbard's already dropping some apologia here for Russia too. What did little Miss Scumbag say? This war and suffering could have easily been avoided if Biden admin and NATO had simply acknowledged Russia's legitimate security concerns regarding Ukraine becoming a member of NATO, which would mean U.S. and NATO forces right on Russia's border. So again, basically echoing the Jacobin sentiment that the U.S. and the West made war inevitable here, that Russia had no choice but to invade Ukraine because Ukraine was not a part of NATO, but could have been at some point in the future. I mean,
All right,
to your point, I guess I get why that section of the left liked Tulsi Gabbard so much. They sound almost identical to one another. Identically wrong, might I add. Identical to Tucker Carlson. Identical to the guy whose show got clipped up on and used on Russian state media. Like, no, I don't. I have no use for these people. There's another Mark Ames, war exiled or whatever his thing is. There's another guy I was reading here. What was his take? There have been so many fucking garbage takes on this. I like
at some
this
point,
apology. There needs to be a discussion what force and what response looks like to Russia. But like, if you're really a pacifist, I think you owe it to your listenership to really thoughtfully consider the price of pacifism here, the price of peace, because the price of peace might be too high. And also, oh, I remember what that other guy said. I can't remember his name though. It was this idea that like all of us are sitting in our ivory towers and talking about this conjecturally and how it's all abstract for us. And I sort of think for a lot of these pacifists, it's all well and dandy to talk about pacifism when it's not your way of life getting absolutely shattered by an invading force. No, if it's my way of life getting invaded, I'd actually, one, want to fight back, and two, want someone to give a shit about me. All these people who've always said, oh, human rights, human rights, human rights, I'd want someone to stand up with me. I wouldn't want people to sit down silently and go, not my fight.
I'm curious when this conflict is over, will the left have a better or worse sense of itself, just based on how typical discourse goes? And I know there's going to be some re-racking.
I could realistically
there's going to be some re-racking, but
yeah, I could see this really being the beginning of a like 4 poles sort of align, like still 2 parties, but basically 4 poles. Or maybe even more than that, but like really no longer 2 camps, but like much closer to 4, where you've got, I don't even like call it. I'm gonna call them the Chamberlain left and the Chamberlain right. Like, I'm not gonna give them anti-war. They are handed overs. Like because they're not actually because to assume to say that their strategy results in no war sort of gives them credit. I don't actually think they've earned here, and I think actually
Oh,
every
okay.
day as things progress, they're actually in favor of war. What they are is not in favor of, like, they're going like Pontius Pilate on this. Like, Jesus still gets killed
Yeah.
at the end of this
Uh,
story, but they're washing their hands of shit.
dissolving requires an effort that they find they're either incapable of or is a part of the whole war process.
Yeah, no, being
Yeah.
anti-war actually means being willing to. I mean, okay, when one country wants to invade another country, if you're actually anti-war, you should be pro the defense of the country being invaded. To me, unless if anti-war doesn't mean that, anti-war actually doesn't mean anything. Anti-war really means, like, you know, not my fight.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it also means you're capable enough of a diplomat to keep you out of it.
right. And the U.S. is incapable of that. Also, it's like, it's one thing for your classmate to shimmy sham away from a fight while you're getting your ass kicked. It's another thing for the principal to do it, or the
Yeah,
assistant principal. And, like,
right.
the United States, in terms of global stature, is much closer to, like, a teacher, or like the vice principal, maybe
Yeah,
the principal at one point, like the principal that's now the vice principal. You know what? You complete your analogy however you like, people. I don't give a shit about
you're
that.
more than a security
Yeah,
guard.
you're not like the classmate. You're like, oh, I don't know. Let these two kids fight it out. School bullies just taking the lunch money. And oh, by the way, even if you were just a classmate, you should stand up for your fucking classmate.
Yeah.
Like, I, I, this is who I am as a person. This is what I teach kids to do. This is how I got myself in a lot of trouble in my younger days. How I'll probably still get myself in trouble in the future. Like,
Well, is
you
this the
stand up to
difference?
bullies.
Is this the difference between anti-war and pacifism?
Yeah, I guess the pacifist just gets hit, right? Like,
Yeah, but that's not even a sign as like a tactic in the sense of like I don't know. I don't know.
like you almost want like the acquiescent in a weird way. It's because it's just like, just let it happen. It's gonna be what it is. I don't know. I don't want to call them anti-war. I think they've lost that designation at this point. I don't know what designation we want to give them, but these people are actually pro-war. Because a position like this, like a position like Hassan is taking, assures that Moldova is going to get invaded in the future. If you're like, well, look, the Russians have a point here. They're worried about NATO, blah, blah, blah. You're basically doing all the pavement work to justify a further invasion into another place, another attempt for the Russians to reclaim territorial sovereignty. So, I mean, I think that's the other way I'd say they're not anti-war, that they're actually making arguments that help make it easier for the war makers to make war. They may be like, I'm against using guns, but also let us remember that China has a claim to Taiwan. You got to hear both sides. Actually, in this case, is very, very dangerous. And by the way, got to hear both sides is an argument that Felix Biederman of Chapo Trap House, who is equivocating hard on this shit, and in an irony-soaked way. But let me read his little blurb here. The game plan since 91 has clearly worked. Looting Russia blind and creating a deep resentment followed by nonstop military expansion has kept them from committing any bold acts. Basically, in a sarcastic tone, echoing the Jacobin Tulsi Gabbardist line here. No, I think, look, those people aren't anti-war. What Felix Biederman's saying there is basically justifying Russia's war making. So they don't deserve the mantle of anti-war anymore. They are pro-war, like alt
Well,
pro-war, yeah, alt pro-war. Is that
I
that's
guess
gonna catch on like wildfire, baby?
the push and pull is this, from my perspective, from if I'm trying to get in their heads but remain rational. So the purpose of NATO is so that you can at any point take care of something like Putin without having to ask any one specific nation to come up with the defense in order to take care of any one or multiple aggressors. And so if we were in the position where NATO was stronger, Putin would then have to consider NATO differently, and maybe this neutralizes the war. But then you're giving power to, and I know this is this goes into the New World Order tropes, I suppose.
Yeah, the New World. No, I'm at double NATO. No, like Brian, I'm like, I want like super NATO at this point. Never has the argument for NATO been more compelling. I was NATO ambivalent 8 to 10 years ago, going like this maybe is a vestige. You know, I kind of wanted to think we were at the end of history too. I'm a millennial. But like, no, now I'm like, no, NATO good, more NATO, double NATO, extra NATO, triple NATO on Tuesdays. Like no, lots of NATO.
I guess the conclusion I'm at now is that we are not at an equilibrium with NATO, but also, who was to ever think that we would have got this right to begin with? Like, this was, if this is done honestly, and I suppose that's the big leftist if NATO is done in good faith, even if everything is done in good faith, you're going to get it wrong many times, as far as having the right amount of power, as far as flexing the power at the right time. You're going to think you have it right immediately, and then you're going to need some sort of amendment process, or else you're really not, you're not going into this whole thing honestly. It is okay to fix this. It's okay if it needs fixing. I don't know where else to go with that, but
look, I think what I want to happen, I guess we can end here on this. What I want to happen at this point is I want Ukraine to immediately be admitted into NATO. I want NATO to respond on the Russian tanks and invasion and push the Russians back into their border. At this point, I want total and complete sanctions on all the Russian oligarchs, especially on RT. No, like they crossed the line here, and either we have a post World War II order, one where we like war criminals being put on trial and held to account for what they've done. We like ethnic cleansings not happening, and we like territorial sovereignty of countries being respected, or we don't. And does the United States have some blame for the erosion of that international world order? Sure, absolutely. But that's not what's going on right now. Right now, what's going on is that Russia is assaulting that international world order in a way that meaningfully needs to be pushed back by the United States, yes, but like more broadly, and it really, this is not, I don't want the Bush like let's go it alone sort of bullshit here, because this needs to be all hands on deck for the rest of the world. Yeah, China's gonna say I don't think it's an invasion, but like India, yeah, they need to actually grow a fucking pair and get on this. Israel, don't know what the hell they were doing. Glad that they're on the trolley now, but it apparently took more conversations than it should have. But the rest of the world needs to basically be like, no, Russia, you're like actually not allowed to do this, and you're gonna become a pariah state. And countries that do business with Russia, and that block, I guess Russia and China now, because they're like loosely aligned. And again, that's not really the West's fault. China had a choice here in choosing to call what Russia was doing an invasion or give them rhetorical cover. And China is choosing to give them rhetorical cover. Cool. But like the West needs to have a unified front here now. Especially when you have 1/6 of the world's landmass in Russia, getting in more chummy relationship with another massive country in China, both of which are nuclear armed. This has to be a Western response, and it has to be a strong one.
So as far as the unified front goes, Biden is now receiving a response and mostly criticism for his initial what is it called, a tranche of his initial sanctions, and how weak they are.
They're pretty
So
weak. Yeah.
yes, and so of those sanctions, what things could have been fielded by NATO if NATO was structured differently? And if there is some
Well, you
sort
do need
of
an international coordination of sanctions too. I think that's important.
right,
Like, yeah, like us just sanctioning Russia is only part of this. You actually have to crack down internationally and then go after the black money sites. God damn it! Like Cyprus, like the Bank of Cyprus. Like, there's so many of these Panama Papers like organizations that we know are just out there that the Russian oligarchs have been using for years, up to and
well,
including Bitcoin.
so part of the reason why Biden's response had the potential to be weak is because the sanctions that the initial tranche, the initial tranche that he just did should have been something that NATO engaged. And that would have pushed Biden to push whatever the second tranche is, it would have became the first. And I'm not saying that would have been better, but it would have been a superior hand to play. But instead, the Biden was given the opportunity to play a weak hand, and so he played it.
The administration's handling of this so far has been perplexing. Real quickly before we get into that, what do you want to happen with the Ukraine situation? Have you thought that out at this point?
I really don't think I have an amount of knowledge to where I know how this should end, but it does make me curious as far as what occurred in the history of the Ukraine to where the borders changed to begin with. Like these borders that Putin wants respected, that haven't been respected in so long. When did those borders actually change, and why? And what's the history behind
Not
that?
91. I mean,
No,
Ukraine.
no, as far as the separatist regions that used to have a pre-Soviet geographical outline, that's the connection that I don't quite understand.
Okay.
I think there is some relevance there. Like he's
Okay,
wanting.
but like I guess, yeah, maybe, but like he's attacked Kiev, the capital of Ukraine, at this point. Like, what should be the response?
Oh, okay. As far as the end game here, you can't.
I mean, we've got the do nothing option, and we've got the do something and then fill in the blank as to what the something is. But like,
Well,
what should
there's.
the Western response be to this?
I guess Plan A is oppose Putin directly, which I don't think is ever going to happen. And Plan B is to oppose those who deal with him despite all this.
What would you
How,
do?
how do you best oppose those who see? This is what makes me think that there was some sort of
Do you assist the Ukrainians in pushing Russia back to their borders?
yes. No, I'm trying to think of what is the consequence after all this.
Yeah,
I
no,
guess that was the
right, no, I mean, like, yeah, but like that to me is like ultimately the question here is like you either let Ukraine fall or you assist the Ukrainians pushing them back to the borders, and I think no, after that it's going to be a spider's web of effects from there.
right. I
Because
get. I thought that was your real question there,
no,
not as
no,
far
no.
as whether or not you hope them.
No, because like, dude, like, I think you arrive at paralysis by analysis,
Yeah.
thinking too hard about do nothing, do something. I like at a certain point, you like the question is Russia has invaded Ukraine. And it's not just about like the outerlying provincial regions. Although again, I would still say like, look, that's I mean in the wake of Crimea, probably something that should be discussed. But like, I'll also concede that it's qualitatively different once you're invading Kiev, the capital, and that to me, it just seems like ignoring that open-handed slap to the face. Like, it's someone making a snide comment about your wife or something. Like, it's just one of those where it's like, if it had just been a pot shot at me, whatever. I don't actually think I can let you take saying what you said about my wife slide. You insert the comment there that's offensive enough for you. Like, nice wife. And extend out the sentence from there. It like, I think the real question is, do you let Putin assimilate and annex Ukraine, or not? And if you say no, okay, cool. I'm there. And then it's like, how do we do that? I can't get myself to a place where Putin takes Ukraine, the Ukrainian people who have had their own country, many of whom are in their 30s, like I am, who have lived their whole lives free, are now annexed and now living under the oppressive regime of Russia. And like feel like letting that fall was the right thing.
Yeah,
to do.
for that crowd, I have yet to hear the argument of, and that's why he'll stop at Ukraine.
Well, yeah, and then like lastly, I mean, another point here is the entire premise of denuclearization, a subject that very often the same section of the left that wants us to be nicey nice with Russia is always like, oh, we need to denuclearize. Don't you understand? One of the biggest problems is that we have all these nuclear weapons. Blah, blah, blah. It's a very like Cold War sort of thing. Jill Stein would talk about this, right? You remember? We got to get rid of all the nuclear weapons. Well, there is no more damning 1-2 punch to this get rid of the nuclear weapons argument than the Gaddafi precedent, where we got Gaddafi to give up all of his chemical weapons only for him to end up dead with like a spike up his ass or something, like about half a decade later. And then now Ukraine, where we got Ukraine to give up all of their nuclear weapons only for them to fall. They probably would be territorially intact right now if they had the credible threat of nuclear, like raining down some nuclear fire on Russia. The compelling argument at this point, thanks to the United States and Russia, and this is the only time I'm going to both sides it. Thanks to the United States with what they did with the Gaddafi, and I guess to a lesser extent Saddam too, in a way, and what Russia's doing right now with Ukraine, the argument has never been more salient for Kim Jong-un, that lunatic, who is absolutely starving his own people and letting them suffer at the hands of COVID. No problem. Never been more salient for that guy, wedged in between China and Russia, to get some nuclear weapons to make sure that he at least has something to bluff Russia and China with. Don't be America thinks that Kim Jong-un's trying to launch nukes at us. And I think it's pretty clear that like the whole I want to start a war with the United States thing's a way of like faking out Russia and China, who are the ones who need to be legitimately worried if Kim Jong-un gets a nuclear weapon. I mean, the more you think about it, who is that nuke really for? Is it really for the United States? We're so American exceptionally obsessed that we think that it's like China's going to use North Korea as the proxy state to launch the nuclear weapon at the United States. Whereas I think there's probably a much better argument that the North Korean vanguard sees it as a strategic importance to have a nuclear weapon so that China and Russia don't just come in and knock down that little fun Juche vanguard that they established there. No, I think that's the takeaway. That's the takeaway.
Yeah.
Get nukes. If you're a small country, up your nuclear weapons program. Because Russia and China, they are meandering around the world. They're looking for deals to do. They got the Belt and Road Initiative. You got Vladimir Putin with his history lessons thousands of years ago into the future. And don't forget about the United States. We're not exactly the greatest actors in the world. If you're a small country, you need to get yourself some nukes. Because Russia, China, even the United States and the West, we're coming, and we're going to meddle in your bullshit, and you better be ready for it. Like that's the teachable takeaway moment. And if the West doesn't want that to be the lesson, then that's the price here. If you're someone who thinks that getting rid of nuclear weapons is a really important project for the world, almost on par with climate change, Ukraine now becomes even more relevant and salient to you. The defense of Ukraine, the sovereignty of Ukraine becomes even more relevant and salient to you. And if you're someone who cares about denuclearization but somehow doesn't want to get involved in Ukraine, you really have to ask yourself, what does the denuke project look like in a Ukraine has fallen world? I can't imagine it.
Anti-war and anti-nuclear are definitely two different things. And this is a subject which kind of pushes that upon you to distinguish. Yeah.
In a way, well, I mean, if anything, it makes the mutually assured destruction argument. If Ukraine falls, the mutually assured destruction argument becomes not quite ironclad, but goddamn compelling. Something short of ironclad. I'd put it at compelling. But it's one that would move people. So I just think there's a lot of reflection that needs to be done on the left, and we need to get our shit in order because, like, look, at some point, I would like to take another crack at breaking the back of the Boomercrats, and their Hakeem Jeffries and the people that the Boomercrats would hand off to be the Boomer vanguard of the Democratic Party. But it's going to take a progressivism that is way smarter on foreign policy and also has new things to say on the domestic front, which we'll talk about at a different juncture here. But like, I mean, I am watching this right now and I just find my head in my hands as some of the loudest voices on the left like look like goobers. I mean, Vosh is a leader on this. However you feel about Vosh, that guy is probably in the top 5 in terms of most right on this issue right now.
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't like him, you really need to think about that. There's so much, because like obviously we're never going to run Vosh. God help us. Can't run that guy for office. But there needs to be people on the left who actually have cogence on this. It can't be up to the dopey center who failed us so many times to be providing the insight. Crystal and Sagar had, and they were equivocating too, but they were more salient and more right on this shit than Hassan was. We got to do better, man. I'm not leaving the left. The fucking conservatives are monsters. Like, look what they're doing with the trans bill and shit. That's not what's going on here. We need to, some of these people are not our friends. Some of these people, we can do better. Let us hold ourselves to higher standards. Brian, do you have any final thoughts here?
This is overwhelming. That's my final thought, and I'm going to try for it not to become so overwhelming. I'm sure there is a way to get through the aggregate here, but my goodness.
Yeah, I'm gonna keep following this here. If time permits, on Sunday I might hop in, or maybe even late Saturday night I might hop in. Well, actually Saturday night I'm supposed to go to a party, but like maybe Sunday night, I am going to get a chance to hop in here. I need to do some domestic stuff too, and I think I might use the domestic conversation to kind of talk about some of my thoughts about where progressivism needs to go on that front too. Because I just think this should be the opportunity for us to shine, and we're not shining right now.
Speaking of that, it would be worthy of note, not to shoehorn any third-party politics in too much, but I guess this is overwhelming. I do find it worthy of note that the Movement for a People's Party just imploded, and not just imploded, but is having a lot of trouble. And as it is having a lot of trouble, it's kind of now an understanding that the originator of this party basically is financed through ways that only his father can explain. So if you want to,
are we talking about Hinkle? Is that Jackson Hinkle?
This is Brana, Nick,
okay.
With Movement for the People's Party.
God, so, they're a lot, but I mean, like Jimmy Dore and his ties to RT America. Yeah, like there's just a lot of sus people involved in that movement.
This is the party, and supposedly the dissension in this leftist party is we can't make mask mandates a big issue because then we can't cross over to the right. So apparently your ideology is so valuable that this is quite a roadblock for you. And so that is 2022, the state of this is the party that was supposed to change things.
Well, I mean, I remember when I spoke with, I really wish I had like stealth recorded that guy. I remember I spoke with the candidate from the movement of the People's Party back in early January here. Uh, I He kept talking about wanting to reach across the aisle and work with the people on the right, and I kept asking him like, on what?
Yeah.
On what? Like specifically what? Well, they want healthcare reform. I'm like, they don't. They don't. You never, if you talk to them, they never say that. They want their prescription drug that they are on specifically to be lower. That is it. They don't want systemic reform. They don't see a systemic problem. They want the system to work for them. They don't view that as a systemic problem. They view that as a them problem. And you could fix their problem if you just picked up the cost for their medication. They just don't view it like that. And it's like the same thing on taxes. The VAT. If anything, the last 2 years, really the last 5 years, have made it very clear that like this dream of a bridge across the aisle that like we can go across, like there's just not that much common ground to be had right now. Right now, we have a generational and cultural like clash. It's friction. You have people who are identifying on the gender spectrum and all that sort of thing. Like on one side here, you got Bible thumpers on the other. And those tensions are only getting heightened. Like you got people who think that trans people should be embraced and treated with respect and dignity, and that we should care about them and like make sure that they are supported and give them equal rights and equal inclusion in society. And you got other people who are ambivalent to that notion. And you can't get someone to halfway care. And the idea of halfway caring is not actually really satisfactory. I think anyone who's ever been in a relationship where their partner halfway cares about the thing that they care about gets just how unsatisfactory that becomes pretty quickly. Or if anyone's had to feign interest or feign concern,
Well,
they
that's
don't
why,
care
like,
about the same shit we care about.
And in this issue, and I know we're not talking about the trans issue as we wrap up the show about Ukraine, but I believe there's always an angle with issues like this where if you take it, you remove the need to care. For instance, you may or may not care specifically, subjectively about trans rights, but if you care about an overall Orwellian presence, about a governor asking you to surveil your other people, you don't have to subjectively care about it to objectively understand that that's the whole wrong direction for the culture.
Oh, so I know we've been beating up on the left, but that's only because it's completely pointless to beat up on the libertarian movement at this point. Because like, not even for a second do I need to really explore how like the libertarians are being absolutely inconsistent on the non-aggression principle. Like if you're a libertarian and you're watching this right now, it's so obvious who's the bad guy here, and you can go through libertarian account after libertarian account and find just stunning amounts of equivocation. With We need to be better if we're ever. No, it's.
I know.
You watch Biden; he's so frustrating, and then like I'm like, okay, like AOC, we could maybe coach her up, okay, but like there needs to be more of us, and we need to stop being so stupid. And we also need to be like the Chapos should have been gone a long time ago. Like they stopped having anything kind of useful to say a hot minute ago. Once Virgil Texas got busted with the grooming stuff, him, Bree, Joy Gray, the child, like they should have been waysided. A lot of these people should have been waysided. Like really, I'm not saying like saying a questionable word on stream should get you canceled. I am saying, however, having an egregiously bad take on casualty involved incidences should get you canceled. Like, yes, no one, as bad words are, no one typically dies when someone says a bad word on a Twitch stream. But like, if you're kind of like endorsing a scenario that is going to result in a body count of hundreds or thousands, like, yeah, absolutely, someone should write you off forever. Like, totally. And by the way, if I've ever endorsed something like that, please bring it to my attention so I can disavow it, because I do preemptively. But like, I just can't think of a scenario where that I'd be wishy-washy on this one. So yeah. Biden's people, I know I was going to segue into this earlier. It's amazing how the administration has managed to get so much of this right. And yet, like when they were talking about the false flags, they're talking about, they were doing all those press conferences and stuff that were going badly for them. And yet they were actually telling the truth during all of it. It's amazing how bad the Biden administration is at doing stuff, even when they're doing the right thing and they're actually in the right. Mm-hmm. So yeah, no, dude, I'm endlessly frustrated. This is a really frustrating time to watch politics. But
I came into this Biden administration primarily suspect of Mr. Lloyd Austin, who we had to make an exception for.
General McRaytheon. Raytheon stock, by the way, doing great right now. $95 a share from 73 when he got in. Yeah.
And I trust me, the moral ambiguity is alive and well as I make a defense for us making a defense for Ukraine. But the
one thing that's like not ambiguous to me is like, as middling as Biden is, it's so obvious that Trump would be doing this worse, right?
Oh yeah,
Trump would absolutely have gotten on the phone with Zelensky, and the first thing he would have brought up was, well, Vladimir, I really could have used some help a couple of years ago when I was running against Joe Biden, but you didn't seem to want to help me then. Like, it's absolutely the first thing that would have come out of his mouth. Real shame about the Russian invasion. What are you gonna do about that? Maybe it could have been a better friend. It pays to have friends, doesn't it, Vladimir? No, I mean, absolutely, especially after the Ukrainians leaked the calls and stuff. No way. Trump absolutely would have looked at this as his moment for comeuppance on the Ukrainians. Not a doubt in my mind. I mean, you can go further back and see how he's wishy-washy on Crimea. You can look at the quotes that he did.
It's also, does Donald Trump engage in vengeful acts at the end of his second term?
Does it's a question of what kind? Yeah. Now
he's just looking for anything.
Yeah,
and this is something.
Yeah, and especially now having realized, now being educated on what the impeachment process is and not having it be a question mark for him. He absolutely would do this. It'd go like, what are you gonna do? Impeach me again? Oh, it doesn't mean anything. Nothing means anything. You guys don't care. So yeah, no, like as bad as Biden is, it's kind of like the COVID thing. As bad as Biden is on this,
it's still lesser evil.
And that actually means something, especially when you are talking about outcomes for the Ukrainian people. So if you don't want this to be a conjectural ivory tower, armchair, like ruminating on Twitter sort of thing, think about like, look, Trump settling his score with Zelensky for not getting him dirt on Joe Biden during the 2020 election would absolutely crush the little guy in Ukraine.
Yep.
Like 100%. And kind of conversely, in a weird way, Joe Biden, specifically Hunter Biden's weird ties to Burisma, the oil and gas company in Ukraine, actually, that corruption in this case makes the Biden sort of a stakeholder in preserving the territorial integrity of the Ukraine. You need to stop using the article too. Ukraine. So yeah. That's my final thought. As bad as Biden is, never let yourself for a second think that like Trump would make this worse. He would have made this worse like 10 different ways. And then you can go to
Yeah.
that clip from the Buck Sexton show that he had yesterday, where he was sort of more impressed than mad at Vladimir Putin, just saying, "Well, Vladimir Putin would never do that to me." But, yeah, he would. Trump, you owe him favors. All right. That's going to do it for this episode. Don't worry about the government. My name is Chris Novembrino. You can follow the show at DWATG. We're on Patreon, patreon.com/DWATG. $1 a show is all I ask. And that means if I'm putting out one show a month, that is like $1 a month. So if you can support the show, please help me keep the lights on here. I am working presently. Yesterday, Wednesday was my first day off, and let me get my calendar. That was Wednesday the 23rd. I actually had like a legitimate full day off. It's the last time I've had something close to a day off. We'll call it let's say January 31st, when I only had 2 lessons, was the last meeting. And I guess Friday the 11th. Friday the 11th and January 31st were my last 2 like meaningful off days. As I check my calendar here, they're just not in as much supply as they once were. So please help me keep the lights on here. I love doing this show. I just, I just gotta keep making sure it makes sense. Not like donations are like wildly down or anything like that, but like if you've got $1 a show, and I mean like $1 a month, please. I'd really appreciate it. I know there are like literally hundreds of people listening to the show. So if you can, that'd be great. Because then that means I could probably justify blocking out a day here and doing it more. Like I'm looking Fridays, but like if I could get the numbers up on this a little bit more, I might actually take another day of the week, like offish during the middle of the day, so I could actually get episodes out. And at this point, I'm kind of at a point where I need to make all that stuff make sense. It's a good problem to have, but I'm just like letting you know the lay of my land right now. So otherwise, it's every 2 to 3 weeks we're still gonna be getting a show out. I have not given up on caring about politics. I'll tell you that much. I think about it a lot. Just tends to be in car rides and that sort of thing. Patreon.com/DWATG. It's also where you can get the video cast too, if you want to see the video versions of this show, and also hear the audio versions of this show. Generally 3 days in advance of when I put it out on the main feed. So support the show and you get a little bit of extras. I will hop on there and do some Patreon exclusive. Dude, I need to do like YouTube videos for guitar and stuff. What I need is like, an extra day of the week, Halverson, and I don't have it. Where can people find you on the internet, Brian?
Officially at Postman Retweets, at Postman RTs. I am doing my best to wrap up a big project, and it's thankfully the engagement on my Twitter feed is not the thing that's stopping me from this.
No, that's never been a problem for Don't Worry About the Government's Twitter feed.
So I hope to produce something of substance, as I've been working on something for quite a while now, and but I appreciate the continued queries.
I will give a quick update on the EP. I got the master back on the leadoff single. So leadoff single is done. We're tracking the vocals for the second track, and then the third track's music is drafted. We're going to take another pass here. Looking for a release date sometime in the middle of June. May drop the single here in the next 6 to 8 weeks. So everyone be on the lookout. I'm real excited. Y'all have heard this track before, but you have not heard this track before in this way. You guys are basically going to be like, oh, I remember that little bed of backing music, and like now you're going to hear it in like its like fullness and everything with like additional guitars and stuff on there that was not on the one that has been the backing bed on Don't Worry About the Government. But like this is very much something, and actually this whole EP, I'm very excited about this for all y'all in the sense that this is music, and you've heard my drafting work on this for years. And now you'll actually get to hear those drafts taken to fruition with a great singer singing on it, a great rapper doing additional vocals on it, guitar work and meaningful mastering, post-production and stuff. Like I'm trying to make like a piece of like real high art here. And for all y'all, it will be a fun tie into this "Don't Worry About the Government" journey, because like all this stuff for me is all interconnected. It's all just part of the same unit. So, anyways, I want to thank you guys so much for being part of that journey, because very literally this EP would not sound the way it does if this music hadn't been part of "Don't Worry About the Government," and if some of y'all hadn't been like, "Oh, I like that track," and those sorts of things actually have meant a lot along the way here. So thank you all for always listening. Thank you all so much for listening to the music, to the show. And until the next one, bye bye.